When an event is happening, it's often hard to see the meaning embedded within it. And this is an idea that Rav Hirsch really builds on when it comes to Purim in his collective writings. That's what I want to discuss with you today. I'm Similana, and this is Judaism from Within, where we discuss the ideas of Rav Hirsch. And it's quite appropriate, this topic, especially now, considering we're at war. I'm in Eretz Yisrael right now, and we're being bombarded with missiles from Iran. And it's difficult and it's dark. There's excitement, but at the same time, there's tragedy. We're in the midst of the stage of becoming. We're in an event that is unfolding. It hasn't finished. We're in the middle of it. And in Rav Hirsch's collective writings on the month of Adar, he focuses on a word, Vayehi. We all know the word Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh. And we have this tradition that the word Vayehi always implies something negative. But the question is why? And Rav Hirsch points us to a universal pattern, a truism that exists in the experience of being human, that when we focus on it and we recognize it, it can give solace, but it can also allow us to live more meaningful lives and view past events differently. So that's what I want to do. So to lay the lay of the land, we're going to talk about the verb itself and how that applies to the Megillah, but more importantly, how that applies to our lives today, and then perhaps something about the event we're experiencing right now. So what is the word Vayehi? Well, it's a future form that has the Vav at the beginning of it, which makes it a past. Now, without getting into the technicalities, by the fact that it is a future form, Rav Hirsch looks at it as it takes us back to a past event where the event hadn't finished yet. The event itself was still in the future. That's what Vayehi means. It draws us back to a story that when we were in that story, the event was still in the future. And those events are always difficult. They're always troubling. That's the nature of an event in its development. In an event, while you're in the middle of it, you can't see patterns. You can't see stages. You can just see the messiness of the event. It's not a time to say, well, I see No, you don't. You're in the middle of it. And Rav Hirsch is validating this experience to perhaps give a metaphor for this. What do I mean by the Vayehi with a combination of a future form that makes it into the past with the Vav beforehand, Vayehi? It takes us to an event in the past that at that stage, it was experiencing a becoming. It was becoming an event which would be completed in the future. That is always negative. If you've always wondered why Vayehi implies negativity, it's not that it was a bad event. It's any event that in the midst of it, it hasn't completed yet. As perhaps a metaphor, think of a construction site. A construction site would be a Vayehi b'mei construction site, because in the midst of a construction site, it's dangerous, it's uncomfortable, it's noisy, it's dangerous. You have to wear a hard hat. Why? Because the event is becoming. It isn't complete yet. There will be a time when it will be complete. That will be a different framing. But the framing you do when you draw me to the past to experience an event that is still in the stage of becoming, its completion is in the future, that is Vayehi. And Rav Hirsch points out that Chazal point to three things that the Jewish people only gained through suffering. Now, it doesn't mean we got hit because we got these gifts, but they were all of them required a stage of becoming. So just to recap this point, Vayehi b'mei draws us to the past where the event we're discussing was still in the future. The nature of the verb itself indicates this. It is the future form. Then why is it indicating the past? Because it draws me to the past, to experience the past, the event that is still going to be completed in the future. But while we're in the past, that's suffering. That's difficult. That's almost tragic. But when we get to the future and we have hindsight and we can experience it, we can see the patterns, we can see the good, we can see what came from that. But in the midst of the suffering, that's not a time for joy. That's a time for the experience. That's a time for work. That's a time for focus. That's a time to experience the becoming and change in the process. Now, this will parallel to our own lives in a moment, but the three examples Rav Hirsch gives us, the three gifts that Chazal describe the Jewish people got, but only through suffering: Olam Haba, Eretz Yisrael, and the Torah. Now, each one of these only came through suffering. The Torah came through suffering. What does it mean we gain the Torah through suffering? And Rav Hirsch points out that it's not a book of law, like a do, don't do. It requires a complete fundamental transformation that's painful. That act of transformation is difficult. Deciding to change your very frame of reference, your way of experiencing the world, that is difficult. You take it to an idea of even learning a new idea. Why do people find it often difficult to learn a new idea, to get out of a bad habit of thinking? Because it's difficult. On a sort of symbolic level, if you look at it from a neurological standpoint, you've got patterns of thinking. You've got patterns that have been entrenched. You're used to thinking like this. Then when you see something that agrees with you, you kind of go with it. But the difficulty of changing that, thinking differently, hearing ideas that are counter to yours, it is actually painful because you are changing, you are becoming, and the act of becoming is always difficult. The land of Israel as well. The land of Israel, we gain it through suffering. Our actions are integral to how we are treated in the land. The world to come, once again, requires a journey, requires an educational experience. That was the taking out of the Garden of Eden where man originally failed. And that story is like a parallel to our own lives. Rav Hirsch describes it in a beautiful way, how we are all placed within our own Garden of Eden, an experience where we have to grow the same way God placed man in the Garden of Eden. Man wasn't born there. Man wasn't created there. He was placed there. And that was the event of the scenario in which he had to grow. We all have that. The next world is that which is developed through the becoming of this world. So the idea of becoming, the idea of Vayehi, is always drawing us to a past or drawing us to a stage of becoming where we experience pain. Not pain of being hit by someone, but pain of development, pain of experiencing the change. Sometimes that will be physical pain. But the point is, it is drawing us to a stage where it will be in the future, where we will be able to look back at the experience. Take Purim, for example. We experience Purim as a miracle, not because, I don't know, the laws of nature were broken. No, because we saw the patterns, because we saw the stages, we saw the irony, we saw the turnaround. All the events that took place allowed us to step back and see the Yad Hashem, see God's hand in history. And it's important to focus on that in terms of how this applies to us today. We're experiencing a stage of becoming. Now, I know you can see this in your own lives. When you're experiencing difficulty, that's not the stage to say, oh, this is amazing. No, of course not. But in the future, when you look back at it and you can see the patterns, you can see what came of it, you don't say that was good. You can say, I can see how that becoming led to this. That's what people mean when they say that was miraculous. The two times in history where we speak about something being miraculous, al-Hanissim, there's no overt miracles. There's no overt miracles that we're referring to. When it came to Hanukkah, we're talking about the war. When it comes to Purim, we're talking about the patterns that emerged. And I think this is perhaps a bit of a side point, but there's a temptation to make the miracle to be explicit. And to give you a good example of this, just in my own experience, when it came to the previous Iran war, there was a temptation after the war took place to make the actual miracles as tangible as possible. What do I mean by that? There was people going around speaking how that the aircraft didn't need to be repaired and all the jets that went through were in perfect condition when they returned. People needed HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be some sort of celestial mechanic. They needed God to be acting in the world in a very tangible way, to them to point to it and say it was miraculous. They weren't able to experience that difficulty. No, there was no everything was perfect. People struggled. People like my brother did hours and hours of shifts fixing the fighter jets when they returned back. The desire to make it miraculous is really countering this point. It's ignoring the stage of becoming. It's that it was difficult. It was genuine struggle that took place. Afterwards, we can see the Yad Hashem in the patterns, in the experience of people, etc., etc. Not I needed God to make an open miracle for me to find it meaningful. No, the meaning comes from after the event. When you experience the event and you look back and you see the patterns emerge. But the desire to say, no, it's miraculous because in the stage of becoming, laws of nature were broken. That's childish. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way for you to see the Yad Hashem in the world. almost ironically, you're also being callous at the same time because you're dismissing people's hard work by saying everything was perfect. No, it wasn't. Not by any means. Hours and hours of work that people put in, and the event that we're experiencing right now, I dread to think what people will say of the miracles that are taking place, but people are really working hard. Hours of work that people are putting into, leaving their families, their children, to be in dangerous situations, fixing machines that are dangerous for hours and hours on end. So what we have here is a desire to ignore the stage of becoming, try and put God and sort of make God some sort of mechanic in the time to be able to make it meaningful. But no, in a way, Rav Hirsch is telling us, no, let's go to the stage where it was in a stage of becoming. See the suffering, experience the suffering. When Mordechai was struggling, when Esther was struggling, Esther didn't say that, I don't know, that there was no struggle, there was no fear, the Jewish people didn't really have to fast. No, they were terrified. They really thought it was the end. But they were in the stage of becoming. They were in the Vayehi, Bimei Achashverosh. They were in the time of Achashverosh where things were dark. It was in a past event where the event's fulfillment was still in the future. That is a stage of becoming. That is a bad time. But no, when it comes to the future and we can look back at it, we can see the joy. We can see the patterns that allow us to experience HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand in this world. So, to recap our points, we spoke about the word Vayehi, the unique idea of the word Vayehi, which is a future form used to report a historical past happening. It takes us to a past event that was in the future. It wasn't finished yet, and asks us to recognize that it was dark, it was difficult, but that is because it was in a stage of becoming. And when the stage of becoming is always painful, the joy comes afterwards, the recognition of Yad Hashem comes afterwards. Yes, people's individual lives can be different, but the point of patterns and the point of experiencing suffering, that isn't a time to ignore the pain. That is a time to use the pain as an opportunity to change in this stage, to become better, to draw yourself closer to the Almighty. Then we spoke about the parallel in the modern world, just a previous event that I was privy to have both sides of the stories of open miracles that took place in the 12-day war that just weren't true. They weren't true. Not only were they not true in the case of our talking about the idea of becoming and ignoring that lesson, but it was also callous on the people who were really struggling and really working. They were in the stage of becoming and they were working hard. That's ignoring this message. In our own lives, when we look back, we recognize that things were difficult. But when we step back after the event has taken place, we can experience the joy. We can experience the Yad Hashem. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion. Have a wonderful Purim, and until next time.